Hey guys, welcome to GameBed. Today we're going to a video, and today we're going over Modern Warfare 2's campaign mission Dark Water, but mainly we're going over the small details, subtle details that you may have missed. And for this video, I'm going to give a big shout out to NYSL New York Subliners Maverick. I'm going to link his Twitter down below. A lot of the information I'll be covering here, the small details he picked apart, very in-depth, and has explanations and very in-depth shots and cutscenes as to where you're going to be seeing a lot of these details that he picked out of that gameplay trailer. So I'm going to link not only his Twitter, but also the link to that particular post where he has about a minute of slowed down gameplay showing these different things, such as environmental audio occlusion, as well as the new reflections and updated reflections, things like that we're seeing with the updated engine. So go ahead and check that out. Give him a follow over on Twitter, and I believe he also has a YouTube as well. So check out his page down there. And go ahead and show him some love, because he went through, just like I go through and pick out all the weapons, he went through and picked out a lot of the really small, finer points with the gameplay that are going to add to the overall immersion of the gameplay. So, first off, jumping into this, right off the bat here, the timeline is October 22nd, 2022. So, very similar to Modern Warfare 2019, where the gameplay, the campaign took place basically present day. I think it was a few days after the game released is when the first campaign missions started in the timeline in 2019, and here we see the same thing. So basically, Task Force 141 has been operating for a few years at this point, and this mission here that we're seeing, Dark Water, takes place October 22nd, with the game launching on the 28th. So it will be a few days prior to we actually get our hands on the game. So it leads me to believe, kind of curious where the timeline of the game is going to run through. Is it going to run all the way up to the 28th, 29th, 30th, something like that? Or how's that timeline going to play out? Is it going to go even further beyond October? We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, but I do like that they're sticking with this modern timeline, real time, right to where the game is being released. I think is really interesting. In this gameplay, we see a combined Special Forces units, or a combination here, the coalition of Task Force 141, Mexican Special Forces, led by our new character, a member of Task Force 141, being Alejandro Vargas. So we see him as part of Task Force 141. This is going to be a combined op with Task Force 141, Mexican Special Forces, and Graves, who's the leader of Shadow Company. So you will notice some Shadow Company soldiers here in the gameplay, especially right off the bat. We do see that classic Shadow Company operator with the night vision nods at the infill scene there as well when they're roping up to the oil rig. So that's really cool to see. One thing in the gameplay, mounting making a return again. Obviously, with the modern gameplay, operators in the real world mount their weapons, so it makes sense. I'm curious what that'll look like for LMGs. Will bipods actually have a purpose in this game? I would really like to see machine guns be relatively difficult to control unless they're mounted up with a bipod. I think that would make more sense in a lot of situations, depending on what caliber and type of machine gun it is, obviously. That would, at least for some game modes, I think that would be something interesting to play with. Obviously, you can't only have it so machine guns are only viable when on a bipod, but I think the previous Battlefield games have done a good job, specifically like Battlefield 4 and 3, where if you're mounted up with the bipod, it definitely increases the accuracy of the weapon. Next up, moving into real-time shadows and reflections. So this is where NYSL Maverick gives us a lot of these details over from Twitter. First off, the one thing I noticed is wet clothes, right? In the mission, you're in the middle of a storm going on. It's a heavy rain going down here. So one thing you notice is on all of the operators, you're going to get that wet look to the clothes. So they do a good job here, from what I can tell, of making it look like the operators' clothes are wet, especially the Shadow Company guys with that black, sleek, wet look on the clothes. I think looks really good. Also, keep in mind, this is all pre-alpha gameplay, too. So if it's looking this good for pre-alpha, I'm really excited to see how even more refined it may look come launch of the game. Next up is for the muzzle flashes of the weapons. Some of these engagements, particularly indoor but also outdoor, you can see with friendlies and enemies specifically, you'll see muzzle flash reflections on weapons and surrounding objects. So in a lot of these firefights, especially some of these ones inside, when the enemy fires, you'll see a reflection cast onto your weapon that'll cast a shadow of the muzzle flash, as well as onto the nearby objects such as boxes, and vice versa. When you're firing, your muzzle flash is also going to cast a shadow when firing at enemies indoors as well as outdoors, but it's obviously much more noticeable in these confined dark rooms that you see some of those engagements here taking place in the trailer. Next up would be the light of your weapon. So light on your weapon, this goes to the real-time reflections and shadows and the casting of the light. So when some of these missions here are the portions of the mission where you guys are stacked up going upstairs and things like that, you'll see as your teammates pass in front of you, it's blocking the light. So it's casting a shadow in real time that's going to cast that shadow onto your weapon and some of the nearby surrounding objects such as puddles. Obviously on this map, we see a lot of water, so the puddles, things like that. So we'll have to go ahead and look at that. I'm also curious to see how that's going to look in different missions where it's not so dark. Here we have a dark rainstorm, so this real-time light and reflection, if it looks this good here, what's that going to look like in lighter daytime where there's no storm in some of those gameplays? And you can see here in a lot of the gameplay, the lights from the boat is reflecting off the water, nearby objects, puddles, things like that. It's also casting shadows onto your weapon and other enemies as they run around. You can see shadows being cast from enemies. If that light is directed on the boat, you'll see the enemies' shadows are being cast onto the nearby shipping containers and things like that, which is actually really cool. And again, this adds to the immersion of the game, which one reason I really like the Call of Duty campaigns is just because it's very immersive overall. Another thing that you may notice here is light from the explosions. We have a couple explosions here. It's going to cast real-time reflections again into puddles as well as nearby surrounding objects, and it's going to cast a shadow in real time on your weapon. But you will notice the shadows being cast, or the explosion reflecting from the puddles, and those shadows from the explosion being cast and affecting the light on not only your soldier, your weapon, and nearby surrounding objects, including friendly and enemy soldiers. Next up, you will notice the real-time reflection in puddles, like I just talked about. Mainly, you'll see that with your friendlies operators running around as they're going over water. You'll see that reflection in real time. Also, with the muzzle flashes, you'll see that reflection shadow cast as well, and the lights, like I talked about, reflecting off of puddles and also casting those shadows. Next up is audio occlusion. So rain and thunder, you may have noticed this in some of these where we go indoors in part of this mission and then outdoors. Rain and thunder sounds are going to be muffled and faded when you're inside versus outside. There's a big difference in the audio. So when you watch that back, pay attention if you watch back the trailer after this, just to when you're indoors you can hear the faint rain and thunder going on outside and the waves crashing. And then outside, obviously, just like it would be in real world, it would be a much different and more prominent sound, which again, adding to the immersion. Same thing with gunshots. You have a scene here indoors where not only your gunshots, particularly with the Vector, and you have some shotgun action inside of a confined space, is going to sound different than it does outside in the open spaces in this map or the gameplay mission. Also, you have friendly operators who are shooting in a room next to you, and you can hear those muffled shots. Yes, they're suppressed, but it's going to sound different and more muffled when they're indoors and a few rooms over versus how it sounds when they're outside. So again, adding to the overall immersion of the level, I think is really, really cool. And again, just adds to the realism feeling that I love from these Modern Warfare games. Just makes you really, that's what I want to do with these games, is always feel immersed. Doesn't need to be realistic, but I want it to be immersive. And they're making it immersive by taking real world aspects and implementing them into the game, which is the right way to do this. And that's what I really love about Infinity Ward and the Modern Warfare series. Next up, for other visuals, we have like water droplets, like I talked about on the friendlies and enemies' clothing, specifically with Shadow Company, those sleek black uniforms. You can tell you can see the water running off of the uniforms if you look closely, as well as just the wet, matted look of the clothes that the operators are wearing, and the water droplets kind of running down off of your weapon, and more particularly the air optic here on the Scar H. This is another one that Maverick noticed. But I think a lot of you probably noticed in the gameplay is that you can see the water on that VLK scope on the Scar Light. You can see the water droplets and they're running down the optic, which is really, really cool. Right off where you would look through the reticle there. So very, very interesting. I love the real world aspects of this. Another thing you'll notice is obviously a lot of the modern gear, right? We haven't seen modern gear like this since Modern Warfare 2019. We have a lot of modernized plate carriers. We see some nods from the Shadow Company team. We see a lot of helmets, maybe fast MTs, things like that. I'll get more in depth when it comes to the gear later on, where we can get more. It's not as dark, and with the dark, wet look to everything, it's hard. I'm not going to try and speculate and pick out different helmets, plate carriers, things like that. But when we get our hands on the game, most likely, and we can get into the operators and look at things, same as we did with Modern Warfare 2019, I'll pick all that apart. We'll look at the gear and things like that, especially when we get more trailers. I really like looking at the helmets, where the nods are connected, the battery packs, things like that. So those are a lot of things, especially looking at the headsets that they're wearing, where their contacts, what Razor Walker, things like that. I'm really excited to see what kind of gear they're using. That's another thing I'm really excited for. But these are all the details here, small details that you may have missed that myself, others, and mainly, like I said, shout out to Maverick here over on Twitter. I'm going to link all of his information down below. Go ahead and check him out. He has a lot of good content that he posts over there on Twitter. And also, he picks out some of these weapons, too. When we were having the weapon gameplay, he was just posting a lot of the good screenshots that allowed me to look at things that I necessarily would have had to go in and look over with a fine-tooth comb. So a lot of, Maverick and a lot of you are on top of getting all those screenshots out there and tagging me in them so I can get a look at things and not have to go in and still frame every single portion of the trailers and pick it apart. So let me know what you guys think down below of the trailer, these small details. Do you like the immersion level? Do you think it's too much? Would you rather see more emphasis or time put into other aspects of the gameplay? Or do you think it's just the right balance? Personally, I think the way they're doing it is they have obviously different teams dedicated to different things. So just because they're putting in this amount of work to the lighting, reflection, audio occlusion, things like that, doesn't mean any other area of the game is getting neglected. So keep that in mind here. All my information is down below. I have Twitter links as well as Instagram, Twitch over there. We'll live stream once in a while once we get on the live stream schedule again here, but mainly we'll be live streaming mostly on YouTube as per usual. Also going to link down below the link to the Scope and Crash Games FPS. Go ahead and check him out as well over on YouTube. I co-host a podcast with him over on his channel, and then we upload that to the Scope channel, so you can check out all those episodes there. I'm a co-host now going forward. As long as we keep having good topics to talk about, we're having a lot of fun over there. So go ahead and check that out. We have a lot of weekly content here. On Mondays, we do that live on his YouTube channel, and then we upload that, and we're going to be trying to take out snippets of those episodes and upload them to that Scope YouTube. So go ahead and turn notifications on there. Go ahead and give that a subscription. Let me know what you guys think down below. Till next time, Buffner Gaming, out.